everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are chatting about some of the new releases that I have picked up in the last few weeks, and just wanted to share some of my thoughts on these new releases. They do have a lot of hype around them, so I wanted to see if they were worth the hype. Welcome back to my channel and to another video. If you're new here, my name is Nikita, and on this channel we diversify our reading by being inclusive of BIPOC, especially South Asian stories in literature and in real life. So you can expect a lot of book chats, book recommendations, as well as my podcast called Brown People Problems. Alright, so the three books that I'm going to be talking about today are The Mistress of Bhatia House by Sujata Massey, Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson, and Sunshine Nails by Mai Nguyen. I hope I pronounced that right. Alright, so very first we have The Mistress of Bhatia House by Sujata Massey. This is the fourth installment in the Widows of Malabar Hill series. This came out this July, and this was an interesting read. It certainly took me some time to get through it. Now, if you are new to this series, this is a lovely historical fiction series that is set in 1920s India. And it follows Parveen Mistry, who is the very first female solicitor in the city of Bombay. And so as you can imagine, there is obviously like a lot of great historical context, but also a lot of cool perspective on, you know, women's rights movements, her experience as being the only female lawyer in the city, gender discrimination, what that was like. But it's also an empowering and uplifting story following this main character who is in her early 20s. And I like how this incorporates a bunch of themes. So we've got a small focus on romance in the series, a big focus on mystery, and a lot of really lovely, relevant socio-political narratives from that time. So the very first one, Widows of Malabar Hill, it's really interesting because it's basically about how this really wealthy merchant dies in the city, and he leaves behind 3 wives, and Parveen gets involved as a lawyer because she notices that those 3 women have like signed away all of their inheritance to charity, and that piques her interest, and so she decides to investigate. The second one, which is a Satapur Moonstone, Parveen is in a princely state in India, and there's a case that brings her there where she meets her friend and potential romantic interest Colin, but she also gets like sort of intertwined in like the politics of royalty under the British influence and what that was like. And then you have the third one, which is The Bombay Prince, which is about the visit of Prince Edward that happened at that time in Mumbai, and how it sparked a lot of anti-colonial sentiments and revolution, and what it was like for her to navigate this. So what I really like about Sujata Massey is that she weaves in these really relevant and powerful narratives into the story. So it's not a story that is very independent of the time that it's set in. And I love that, because there's 2 types of historical fictions in my opinion. We have historical fiction that is just set in a certain time, and you just follow the story of a character going through perhaps problems that we would today, and it has nothing really to do with that time and age except for just being like the most basic, most general context. And then there's historical fictions like Sujata Massey's, where the story is so intertwined with that historical context that it makes it just so much more fun to read, and that is a true historical fiction for me. And if you like those sorts of historical fictions, you would love this series. I'm happy to say that everyone I have recommended it to has more or less have had good things to say about this, and Parveen is certainly one of my favorite female characters. This book, now this is the 4th installment, and this takes place, I believe, a couple years or a year and a half after the very first one in the series. So a lot of time has not gone by. But The Mistress of Bhatia House is essentially about how there's a joint family, a very influential, very rich joint family living in Mumbai, and they have 2 daughters-in-law, and then they have like a whole like a slew of like servants, and there is a gathering where something particularly fishy happens, and then one thing sort of leads to another, and Parveen becomes involved with the house help in that house. And there's a huge focus on women's reproductive health. There's a huge focus on fertility, child rearing. There's mentions of women navigating, the lack of like contraception and reproductive health, and just like the limited amount of healthcare that was equitably accessible to people at that time, to women at that time. And she's weaved that very relevant cultural, socio-political narrative into the story, and it was great to read. It's definitely complex. So if you like straightforward mysteries where A happens, B happens, C happens, you may not love this. There's a lot of characters, and there's a couple different plots going on at the same time. So this one, we also get to see a lot more of Parveen's personal life. This heavily involves her sister-in-law, Gulnaz, who's been a minor character that we've seen up until now in the last 3 books. And so there's certainly a lot more that's happening. And for that reason, it took me a little bit longer to get through it. This is over 400 pages. And so it is like a slightly bigger historical fiction, a slightly bigger mystery, but I still really, really enjoyed it. A book that is so rich with characters and stories and plots certainly takes a little bit longer of a time to get through. At least for me, this is not the kind of book that I typically would like binge, but I still had a really lovely time. And I wanted to put it down because I didn't want it to finish, because I don't know if there's going to be a 5th one, when that 5th one is going to come out. So anyway, I thought this was worth the hype. If you enjoy something like this, let me know your thoughts. I think you would really like this. I believe I gave it a 4.5 stars. All right, after that, I read Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson. Now, I basically just bought this because it was on Heather's Picks. So it's like a book list in Canada, and it was Heather's Picks at Chapters, and I usually enjoy Heather's Picks, and so I picked it up. Now, there was a lot of hype around this. It is essentially like rich people drama living in Brooklyn, and I really enjoy those sorts of stories. I enjoy that type of drama. I haven't read one in so long, so I certainly felt very attracted to this. It is a quick read. It is about 300 pages exactly, actually 301, and so it's not too long of a read. So anyway, this story follows the Stockton family, who are these like rich folks in Brooklyn, old money, all that sort of thing. And it follows the different characters in that family. So not only the children of the family, so there are 2 daughters, Darlia and Georgiana, and then it has the daughter-in-law who's married into the family, Sasha, and her husband, Cord. I enjoyed it. There was a lot of fun rich people drama. There's like in-law drama. There's certainly a lot of tension between all of these different characters. Now, people are not loving this online, and I can see why. So apparently this author is just is an editor of a publishing company, at a publishing company, and so I think there's certainly a lot of conversation around the politics in the publishing industry, and I guess like the nepotism. And if you put that aside, I will say that this was a good read. I gave it 3.5 stars. There was nothing amazing about it. So I have read some other rich people family dramas, like The Nest was really good. Crazy Rich Asians was so good. It's probably like the best ever, in my opinion, so far, by Kevin Kwan. My problem with this book was the premise was nice. It was interesting. They had one a racial minority. The son-in-law is Asian American, so it was nice to see, I guess, a little bit of diversity in rich people drama, because usually it's a very, very white and very Eurocentric. But I feel conflicted because there was nothing really that happened in this book. So it was fun to read. It was interesting to get to know the characters. The drama was nice at times, but there's nothing really that happened that caused a ton of conflict. There was a couple things here and there, but there was no major sort of turning point as far as like plot development goes. It sort of almost feels like the author knows a bunch of people who are like this and basically has just written a book of what she's observed in her social circles. That's what it feels like to me. Pineapple Street is apparently like a really famous heritage street, I believe, in Brooklyn, where there's like a lot of multi-million-dollar homes and heritage homes, and the author herself lives on Pineapple Street. But basically this book is just rich people doing rich things. If you like that, you would like it. I would not expect a ton of depth. There was some depth towards the end, but it almost just felt too simple, especially the end. It felt very convenient for me. I was hoping that the story would be a little bit more layered in terms of character development and character psychology, and I did not get that, unfortunately, but it was still I would say it's like a fun beach read, I guess. Don't expect too much. I gave it 3.5 stars, and this is a genre that I'll certainly continue to read because I enjoy it, but I wish that these stories could be a little bit more juicy, if you will. So I don't know if this lives up to the hype. I was surprised that this was on Heather's picks list, to be honest, because she has some incredible books on there. So I was a little bit surprised, and I'm a little bit surprised like the hype that this book is getting. If you have the back page, like the back cover, you can see like a ton of incredible authors blurb this book. You've got like Kevin Kwan, you have Nita Prose, you have Amanda Eyre Ward. I don't know. I don't know if it was worth the hype, but it was certainly a pretty good read. All right, and the third new release that I read this month was Sunshine Nails by Mai Nguyen, and I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was lovely. I gave this book 4.5 stars. This is this author's debut, and she's a Canadian author. She's from Halifax and now living in Toronto. She identifies as Canadian Vietnamese. And this is essentially a story of this nail salon called Sunshine Nails and the Tran family, who's the Canadian Vietnamese family in Toronto that runs it. And, you know, there's so many things that got me in this book. One thing in particular that I really loved was how in her acknowledgements she talks about how, like, why she wrote Sunshine Nails, and she says, for all the immigrant nail techs out there, I hope you enjoyed being the main characters for once. And I absolutely love that. If you've gone into a typical nail salon, they do tend to be typically run by a lot of like Vietnamese folks, and you know, nail techs are just someone who are like really kind of like on the periphery. We don't engage with them too much, or they're there but they're not really consciously there for us. So they are so used to being on the sidelines of stories and witnessing stories as opposed to being like main characters in their stories. So I loved that. This book had amazing depth without feeling like pretentious or painful. Amazing one-liners. So I'm a little bit all over the place. Let me walk you through this. So it's about Tran family. It's multi-perspective. So we follow all the different like Tran family members of Debbie and Phil, who are the parents who immigrated to Toronto and from Vietnam, and they opened a nail salon, and so it follows them and their kids. Their kids are Jessica, who's just moved from California after a failed relationship and loss of her job, and then you have the brother Dustin, you have a recent cousin who's immigrated as well, Fui, I hope I pronounced that right, who's working at the nail salon. And it's such a lovely story of family and the immigrant experience. I love how this book captures the immigrant experience, not just from the children's perspectives, like the first generation Canadians, but also the first generation immigrants, so the parents' perspectives. And I'm so used to reading stories that talk about what it's like to be children of immigrants. But what is it actually like to be like an immigrant in your 50s and 60s, navigating the dual cultures and the differences of values between yourself and your children was super cool. I really enjoyed how the characters were so complex and so contradicting in themselves. And I know some people find that really frustrating, but people are not black and white. People are confusing and contradicting, and that is typically the experience with immigrant folks, is that how we can be so kind of fluid and open in one domain, but then contradict that and be super rigid in something else. And I really enjoyed that very realistic portrayal. There's one part in here, and no spoilers at all, but I would like to read you a couple one-liners that I thought were absolutely incredible. There's a portion where someone asks one of the kids, oh, like, where are you from? And we know that that has like a racial kind of undertone to that. And so it's interesting. Debbie, the mom, has a different perspective on it. So she says, Debbie didn't get it at all. She loved it when her customers asked her where she was from. Any chance she got to talk about how Saigon thrummed with feverish energy and how you could make a friend just about anywhere filled her with immense pride. Why that question filled her children with palpable discomfort never made any sense to Debbie. Maybe it never would. And this is just like one simple but still powerful example of how the immigrant experience can be so different, right? Some immigrants can find pride in being asked where you're from, whereas for others it can be really offensive. Oh, and another one that I absolutely loved was Debbie talking about like people and their cultural identity, and she says, this must be what happens when people marry outside of their race and disassociate themselves from their culture and community. They sever ties to their identity, then claim it back whenever it is convenient for them. And that just really made me pause and think about how that can be true in a lot of different circumstances. Like, I think everyone's relationship with their culture and their cultural identity is very personal. It's very different, but there can be this sense of dissociation from it, only to jump back in and take ownership when it feels convenient. And I can keep going. There is a ton of amazing one-liners, but I think if you are looking for a new, fun, quick read with family drama, it's not rich people drama, but it's family drama. It's very endearing, it's very heartwarming, and it really nicely captures the immigrant experience. I would really recommend Sunshine Nails. I think this should have been on Heather's picks, in my opinion. And this book deserves so much more hype than it is getting. And I would say that if there's one book that you kind of take away from this video and you'd like to give a shot to, I would say it should be Sunshine Nails. But it was incredible, an amazing debut, and I'm definitely going to be rereading it at some point. It's certainly high on top of my list of some incredible books that I've read this year. I did give it a 4.5 stars. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure why I didn't give it 5 stars, so that's something I need to explore more, but it's certainly very well done. All right, everyone, thanks for joining me. Those were the 3 new releases that I read in this past month, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you. If you liked any of these, you certainly let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts, and if there's any new releases that you think I should read. And before I get this comment, Yellowface, I am reading Yellowface now. I've been getting this comment for months. People have been asking me to read Yellowface. I don't know why I held off on it, but I have bought it now and I'm supposed to be starting it ASAP. So I will certainly keep you posted about that one in a couple of weeks. Thanks for joining me today, and thank you for diversifying your reading. See you in my next one.